The coffee here costs 32 pesos. That's about 56 cents in American money, and it comes in a small ceramic cup that a woman named Cora sets on the railing of my porch every single morning at 6:15 without me asking. She just appears. 63 years old, hair pinned back, sandals slapping the concrete steps, and a smile that doesn't seem to require a reason. It is 84 degrees at 6:15 in the morning in Iloilo City. The air smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet, and frangipani from the neighbor's yard, and something frying, garlic and pork fat, from somewhere down the alley. The Jaro River is 2 blocks east, and you can hear it if you close your eyes and let the traffic sounds drop away for a moment. Sometimes, when the breeze comes through just right, it sounds like it's trying to tell me something. I am 67 years old. My name is Margaret Ellen Dawson. Maggie, always Maggie, never Margaret except when I was in trouble, and I live here now. I have lived here for 14 months. My monthly expenses, all in, run to about $1,100. I have a 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor of a quiet building on a quiet street, a ceiling fan that works, a community of people who know my name, and more peace inside my own chest than I have felt in 9 years. 9 years. Now let me tell you what 9 years before this looked like. It was a Tuesday in March, and I know it was a Tuesday because I always did laundry on Tuesdays. That was the rule Patricia and I made together 41 years ago, and I kept doing it alone, because what else do you do with 41 years of routine when only half of you is still standing? I was folding towels in the den, her towels, the ones with the blue stripe she bought at the outlet in Gatlinburg the summer before she got sick, and my son Derek walked in without knocking. He was holding a folder. Not a casual folder. A thick one, with a color-coded tab system I recognized immediately because I had taught him that system. 3rd grade. Red for urgent, yellow for pending, green for done. The tab on the folder he was holding was red. "Mom," he said, "there are some things we need to talk about the house." He set the folder on the coffee table. Inside were printouts, comparable sales in the neighborhood, a contact card for a realtor I had never heard of, a page titled, and I am reading this word for word because I kept that page, Transition Planning, Mom's Long-Term Housing Options. I was standing there holding a dish towel with a blue stripe, and I thought, not yet. You don't get to do this yet. I'm not done. I was born in Muncie, Indiana, which is the kind of city that produces people who don't complain much and know how to stretch a dollar and believe, somewhere deep in the cellular level, that hard work is its own form of prayer. My father worked the line at a parts manufacturer for 32 years. My mother kept the house and kept the books for the church and kept all of us moving in something resembling a forward direction. I was the middle of 3 daughters, which means I learned early that you had to be useful to be noticed, and that being noticed wasn't really the point anyway. I became a nursing administrator. Not a nurse. I want to be clear about that because the distinction matters to the people who actually do the bedside work, and I respect it. I ran the administrative side of St. Vincent's Regional Medical Center for 22 years. Staffing schedules, budget reconciliation, compliance reporting, credentialing. The machinery behind the care. I was good at it. I was very good at it, actually, though I was not the kind of person who said that out loud. I met Patricia Ann Holbrook at a church potluck in 1978. She brought a green bean casserole that was, and I say this with complete authority, the finest green bean casserole I have ever eaten in my life. She was a school librarian. She had red hair and an opinion about everything, and she laughed with her whole body in a way that made the room feel bigger. We were together for 41 years. Married for 11 once that became possible in Indiana, though in every way that counted we had been married from the beginning. Patricia died of pancreatic cancer in January of 2015. From diagnosis to death was 7 months. 7 months is simultaneously forever and no time at all. You learn that very specific thing when you are living it. That time is not a single substance. It can stretch and compress in the same afternoon. She was 62 years old. She had been planning to retire that spring. We had 2 children, both adopted. Derek, 58 now, works in commercial insurance in Indianapolis. He is organized and cautious and loves me in a way that expresses itself almost entirely as worry. He has 2 kids of his own, Brendan and Sophie, who are teenagers and very tall. Renata, 54, lives in Columbus, Ohio. She is a yoga instructor and a certified life coach and has strong opinions about processed food and screen time. Renata loves me in a way that expresses itself as projects. She is always arriving with a new plan for my well-being. After Patricia died, they both descended on the house in Muncie, and for the first 6 months, that was a mercy. People brought food. The house was full of movement. There were tasks, paperwork, the estate, the sorting of a lifetime of shared things into boxes that felt like little coffins. And then the tasks ran out, and everyone went back to their lives, and I was alone in a 3-bedroom house on Tillman Road with 41 years of furniture and a laundry rule and nothing, absolutely nothing, telling me why I should get up the next morning at any particular time. I kept getting up. I kept folding towels. I kept doing the things the structure said to do, long after the structure had lost its reason. That is what 9 years of grief looks like from the inside. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the wearing down of a path that used to go somewhere. I was 65 when the idea found me. I did not go looking for it. I was in the waiting room of my cardiologist's office. Routine checkup, nothing alarming, just the ongoing surveillance of a heart that has been through some things, and the man sitting 2 chairs over was looking at his phone with an expression that I can only describe as private delight. The kind of look people get when they are somewhere else in their minds, somewhere good. His name, I would learn, was Gerald Foss. He was 71. He had been a high school shop teacher in Fort Wayne for 30 years. He was wearing a short-sleeved shirt with small blue fish printed on it, and he was deeply, genuinely tan in the way that takes months of actual sun. I said, "That must be a good video." He looked up and laughed, startled, then pleased, and turned the phone toward me. It was a street market. Overhead lights strung between old buildings, vendors with piles of mangoes and roasted corn and what looked like fried dough. People moving slowly in the heat, not rushing anywhere. A woman at a small table was arranging orchids with the focused attention of someone doing something they love. "Where is that?" I asked. "Iloilo City," he said. "Philippines. That's the festive walk market. My buddy Ray has been living there 3 years. Says he spends $900 a month. Total. Everything. $900. My pension and Social Security together come to $2,600 a month. I have a modest savings account from the house. Patricia and I paid it off in 2003. I had never, in 65 years, thought of $2,600 a month as abundance. In Muncie, in that house, it was a neutral number. It covered what it needed to cover and no more. Gerald and I talked for 22 minutes before they called his name. He showed me 3 more videos from Ray's phone, a Sunday morning by the river, a plate of food called La Paz Bachoy that Gerald described as the best noodle soup you will ever eat in your life, a group of men playing dominoes outside a sari-sari store. He gave me Ray's email address on the back of a receipt. I did not tell anyone I had it. For 4 months, I researched alone. I ordered 2 books. I found forums on the internet full of people who had made this move, retirees, mostly, many of them widowed, some of them younger than I expected. I read about the SRRV, the Special Resident Retirees Visa, which allows foreign nationals over 50 to live in the Philippines long-term on a deposit of $10,000. I read about healthcare costs, about the hospital system in Iloilo, about the neighborhoods outside the city center where the streets were quieter and the markets were close. I emailed Ray in Fort Wayne's buddy. He wrote back within an hour. A 3-paragraph email with specific numbers, specific street names, and a line at the end that said, "Maggie, I have not been lonely a single day. That was the thing I was most afraid of. I want you to know that." I read that line 4 times. Then I closed my laptop and sat in Patricia's chair, the wingback one by the window, and I let myself, for the first time in 9 years, want something that was only for me. I told them in December, over a video call. I had practiced the words. I was calm. I had the information organized, the visa requirements, the cost projections, the name of the expat community organization in Iloilo, a printout of average healthcare costs at St. Paul's Hospital on General Luna Street. Derek spoke first. "Mom, you don't know anyone there." "I didn't know anyone in Muncie when your grandmother moved us here from Kokomo. We were 7. I learned. That's not the same thing, and you know it." "Why isn't it?" He didn't have an answer for that, so he pivoted to logistics. The house. Who would manage the house? What if something happened to me medically? What about the language barrier? What about the time zone? "Have you thought about the time zone, Mom? That's a 12-hour difference. If something happened." "Derek." I kept my voice level. "What are you planning to do about the house?" A pause. Renata looked away from the camera. We thought. Derek said carefully that it might make sense to list it, if you're not going to be living in it, rather than letting it sit empty. "And use the proceeds for what?" "For your care, Mom. For a good facility. Somewhere safe, where someone is keeping an eye on you." There it was. Somewhere safe. Someone keeping an eye. Renata came in then, and her version was softer but not different. She talked about community, about connection, about how isolating it would be to go somewhere so far away, so foreign, without the people who knew me. "Mom, you'd be starting from 0 at 65, in a place where you don't speak the language and don't know the culture and—" "Renata." I interrupted her, which I almost never do. "You have been telling me for 8 years that I need to find community, that I need connection, that I'm isolating myself. Every single visit, that is the conversation we have. So I found a community. I found connection. It's just not in the zip code you expected." She looked like she was going to cry, which I understood. And I was sorry for it. But I did not change my answer. The hardest moment was the last thing Derek said before we ended the call. He said, quiet and tired, "Patricia would have wanted you to be somewhere people could take care of you." I sat with that for a long time. Then I thought, Patricia spent 41 years taking care of people and being taken care of. What she would have wanted was for me to be alive. Actually alive, not just upright. I booked my reconnaissance flight the following week. The flight from Indianapolis to Iloilo City, connecting through Tokyo Narita, takes 22 hours when the connections work and nearly 30 when they don't. Mine connected cleanly, and I was still the most physically uncomfortable I had been since a kidney stone in 2009. The seat was designed for someone 4 inches shorter than me. I drank too much water because I always drink too much water on planes and not enough on the ground. I watched 2 movies without absorbing a single scene from either of them. Somewhere over the Pacific I fell into a half-sleep that left me more disoriented than the wakefulness had. I arrived at Iloilo International Airport at 7 in the morning, local time, on a Wednesday in March. The heat came for me before I was fully through the terminal doors, a wall of warm wet air that felt like walking into someone's laundry room. Not unpleasant, Exactly. Just immediate. Like the country announcing itself. The taxi driver who took me into the city was named Rommel. He was about 40, gap-toothed, and deeply interested in where I was from, why I was here, and whether I had eaten yet. You hungry? I know good lugaw. You know lugaw. I did not know lugaw. Rice porridge. Very good. You need to eat, ma'am. Long flight. He took me to a small place near the Molo district before dropping me at my guest house. A woman served me a bowl of thick, gingered rice porridge with a poached egg floating in it, and sliced green onions and a drizzle of fish sauce, and I sat there at a plastic table at 7:30 in the morning in the Philippines and ate the whole thing and thought, this is a real thing. This is a real city. The food is real. I am actually here. The guest house was run by a woman named Soledad. Sol, she said, please call me Sol. She was 68, a widow herself, and she took one look at me when I came through the door and said, you look tired. Come. I'll show you the room and then you sleep first, everything else later. I almost wept, not from sadness. From the specific relief of someone taking charge for 10 minutes when you have been in charge of everything alone for 9 years. The apartment I eventually rented, after 4 days of walking the Jaro and Molo districts with a printed map and a notebook, was on the second floor of a concrete building on a side street off Isnart Street. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a covered porch that caught the afternoon breeze. The landlord, a quiet man named Ferdinand, asked for 12,000 pesos a month. $212. $212 a month. I stood on the porch that looked out over the alley and the neighbor's mango tree and the slice of sky between the buildings. Someone below was playing a radio, an old OPM ballad, something I didn't recognize, but that sounded like it was about exactly what it sounded like it was about. A dog crossed the alley slowly, unbothered. I knew, in the way that you know certain things with your whole body, that I was in the right place. I had been doing research for 4 months before I ever booked a flight. But research from Indiana is theory. Research in Iloilo is data. I spent 6 days. Day 1. I went to the Bureau of Immigration office and asked about the SRRV, the Special Resident Retirees Visa. The clerk, a young woman named Jasmine, who wore glasses and spoke careful, formal English, walked me through the process with more patience than I had any right to expect. The basic SRRV requires a $10,000 deposit into an authorized Philippine bank, proof of pension income, and a medical certificate. The deposit is yours. It's not a fee, it's a held deposit, and you can convert it into a condo purchase later if you choose. Processing takes 60 to 90 days. I took 4 pages of notes. Day 2. St. Paul's Hospital, General Luna Street. I asked to speak to someone in patient administration, old habit, and was directed to a manager who, bless her, sat with me for 40 minutes. A specialist consultation runs between 800 and 1,500 pesos. A standard blood panel is 400 pesos. A private room, if you need to be admitted, runs 3,000 to 5,000 pesos per night, roughly $50 to $88. I have Medicare in the United States, which doesn't cover me internationally, so I would need supplemental travel health insurance. I had already researched 3 providers. The one that made sense for my situation ran about $150 a month. Day 3. I walked the markets. Iloilo City has a specific grace in its markets. The Molo Market near the church, the Municipal Market downtown, the Festive Walk, each one its own ecosystem. Produce is cheap in a way that still makes me stop and stare. A kilo of mangoes, 45 pesos. A bunch of kangkong greens, 15 pesos. A dressed chicken, 180 pesos. Day 4. I met Graham. Graham Millichap was 69, a retired electrician from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who had been living in Iloilo City for 6 years. He found me in the way expats find each other. Someone at the guest house mentioned I was asking questions, and he appeared at breakfast the next morning and introduced himself without preamble. "You're doing this right," he said, after I told him about the hospital visit and the immigration office. "Most people either come and fall in love with it and decide on day 3, or they research so much from home that they've already decided by the time they land. You're actually looking." "I ran hospital administration for 22 years, I said. "I don't know how to do anything without documentation." He laughed. Then he said something I have thought about many times since. The hardest part isn't the visa or the cost of living. The hardest part is the first 3 months, when you're waiting for yourself to catch up to the decision you already made. It happens for everyone. You just have to wait it out. Day 5. I looked at 4 apartments and chose the one on Isnart. Day 6. I flew home. I had not called Derek or Renata once during the 6 days. Not once. And when I landed in Indianapolis and turned my phone back on, there were 11 missed calls and 4 voicemails. I listened to them in the parking structure while waiting for my lift. Then I called back and told them I was home and everything was fine, and I was tired and I would talk to them tomorrow. I gave myself one night of knowing before I had to explain anything to anyone. They found out about the apartment deposit 2 weeks before I flew out for good. Not because I told them, because Derek drove to Muncie on a Sunday to check in, which I understand now was actually a reconnaissance of his own, and while I was in the kitchen making coffee, he saw the folder on the dining room table. My folder. Red tab. Inside. The lease from Ferdinand. The wire transfer confirmation for the SRRV deposit. The booking confirmation for my one-way flight. One way. He was standing in the middle of the den holding my folder when I came back with the coffee. He looked at me the way I once looked at a patient's family when I had news that changed everything, and for just a moment I felt the old pull, the need to soften it, to manage the impact, to protect him. I did not do that. "You bought a one-way ticket," he said. "Yes. Mom." He set the folder down carefully, like it might detonate. "You can't just. This is. You didn't talk to us. You didn't even. Derek." I set the coffee down too. "In March of this year, you came into this house, without calling, without knocking, same as today, and put a folder on this table. A folder with a realtor's card in it and a document called Mom's Long-Term Housing Options. And you did not talk to me first either." The silence lasted long enough that I could hear the refrigerator humming. "That's different," he said finally. "How?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he said something I had not expected. He said, "I just don't understand why it has to be so far. Why it has to be so drastic." And I thought about that word. Drastic. I thought about Patricia's green bean casserole and the blue-striped towels and the 9 years of folding laundry on Tuesdays for absolutely no one. I thought about the 32 peso coffee and Sol telling me to sleep first, everything else later. I thought about the Jaro River and the man at the forum who said I have not been lonely a single day. I said, "Derek, I have been sitting in this house for 9 years waiting to feel like myself again. That hasn't been drastic enough. I am 66 years old, and I am not sick, and I am not confused, and I am not in need of a facility. I need a life. That is what I'm going to go get." Renata called an hour later. Her conversation was longer and harder because she was crying from the beginning, and I do not handle her crying well. I never have. I love her too much for it not to cost me something. But at the end, she said, "Okay, Mom, I hear you. I don't understand it yet, but I hear you." That was enough. For now, that was enough. 3 weeks later, I shipped 3 boxes to a freight forwarder in Manila, packed 2 suitcases, had a quiet last dinner in the house on Tillman Road, and left the key with my neighbor Rita, who would be watching the house while I decided what to do with it. My flight left at 6 in the morning. I did not cry until somewhere over the Pacific, and then only a little, and about Patricia, not about Indiana. I have been asked by people thinking about doing what I did what the first weeks are like. The honest answer is slow and sensory, and occasionally terrifying in a small and manageable way, and surprisingly fast to become routine. The building on Isnart has 4 apartments. Above me lives a retired couple, Rodrigo and Alma Estrada, who are in their late 70s and have been married so long they finish each other's grocery lists. Rodrigo grows tomatoes on his balcony and appears to be conducting an ongoing and entirely serious argument with a pigeon that visits every morning. Alma bakes pan de sal on Saturdays and leaves a small bag outside my door without any ceremony or explanation, which is simply how she expresses herself and which I find deeply moving. Below me lives a young couple, Vincent and Joy, and their 4-year-old daughter, Leah. Leah has decided that I am her personal project. She knocks on my door with the frequency and confidence of a building inspector, and when I open it, she holds up whatever she is currently carrying, a drawing, a mango, a plastic dinosaur, as if offering evidence of her own existence. I find this completely wonderful. My mornings begin at 6. I make my own coffee now, Barocco blend, stronger than anything I ever drank in Indiana, but Cora, who runs the small eatery at the end of the block, still brings me a second cup most mornings because she passes my building on her way to open up, and she says the routine makes sense. We have coffee together on the porch steps for 15 minutes most days. Her English is limited and my Ilongo is embarrassingly elementary, but we manage. We manage because human beings are very good at managing when they actually want to. By 8, I am either walking or at the market. The Molo market is a 10-minute walk. I buy produce 2 or 3 times a week. By now, the vendors know me. Nina, who sells vegetables in the 3rd row, gives me the good tomatoes from the bottom of the crate and charges me the neighborhood price, not the stranger price. It took about 6 weeks to earn that. I consider it a significant professional achievement. My expenses, broken down honestly. Rent, 12,000 pesos, 212. Utilities, electricity, water, internet, roughly 4,000 pesos, 70. Food, I cook most meals at home. Groceries run about 6,000 pesos a month, 105. Eating out, which I do 3 or 4 times a week, at real local restaurants adds another 2,035. Health insurance, $150 US, paid annually and broken down monthly. Miscellaneous, transportation, toiletries, the occasional small purchase, 3,000 pesos, roughly $53. Total, approximately 625 a month. My pension and Social Security bring in 2,600. I am banking nearly $2,000 a month for the first time in my life. I tutor English 3 mornings a week through a community program affiliated with a local church. My students are adults, a nurse studying for a foreign licensing exam, a young man applying to a maritime academy, a woman learning business English for a customer service job. The pay is symbolic, 500 pesos per session. I am not doing it for the money. I am doing it because I am good at it and because it gives me a reason to be somewhere at a specific time, which, as someone who spent 22 years running a staffing schedule, I understand to be not optional for my personal sanity. On Tuesday and Thursday evenings, I play mahjong with a group of women at the community center 2 streets over. Elvira, Mercedes, Corazon, and a woman everyone calls Nang Sita, who is 81 and who cheats magnificently and completely without shame. I am still learning the game. They are still pretending to be patient about this. Leah, the 4-year-old downstairs, drew a picture of me last month. In it, I am tall and yellow-haired, not inaccurate, and I am surrounded by smaller figures, all of us holding hands. When her mother Joy showed it to me, she said Leah called it our family. I put it on my refrigerator. It started with a flyer. Someone slid it under my door in my 8th month, a printed advertisement in English and Tagalog for a residential development project called Panay Highlands Estates, affordable lots in a quiet subdivision outside the city. Guaranteed appreciation. Flexible payment terms for foreign retirees. An office address on Isnart Street, on my own street, 2 blocks away. I should have thrown it in the bin. I know that now. But I had been in the Philippines long enough to feel comfortable, and not long enough to be properly suspicious, and the numbers in the flyer were exactly calibrated to appeal to someone in my situation, someone with savings, someone who had spent a career in administration, and therefore trusted documentation. I went to the office. Just to look. Just to ask questions. The man behind the desk was named Albert Reyes. He was well-dressed, mid-50s, soft-spoken, and he had a whole shelf of binders behind him that looked like a compliance office and which I later understood were mostly prop. He knew immediately what kind of person I was, organized, data-oriented, careful, and he adjusted accordingly. He gave me binders. He gave me maps. He gave me what appeared to be a notarized deed template and a list of previous buyers with contact information. I did not call the contact information. That was my error, the one that cost me. I put down a 50,000 peso reservation deposit, about $880, on a lot I had not yet visited, based on a site plan that showed a finished subdivision that, as I would later discover, existed nowhere on the physical earth. It was Graham who saved me from losing the rest. I mentioned the investment to him at a coffee shop on a Thursday, still flush with the mild excitement of what felt like a sensible financial decision. He went still in a way that made my stomach drop. He asked for the office address. He asked for Albert Reyes's full name. He made a phone call right there at the table, in Ilonggo, and when he hung up, he set his phone face down and looked at me with the expression of a man choosing his words carefully. Maggie. That's a known operation. DTI flagged that developer 2 years ago. There is no subdivision. The 50,000 pesos was gone. That was real. That stung in a way that had nothing to do with the amount. It stung because I was careful. I have always been careful. I ran compliance for 22 years, and I still walked into it. But Graham called a contact at the Department of Trade and Industry. Elvira, my Tuesday mahjong partner, turned out to have a nephew who was a barangay captain and who knew exactly where Albert Reyes had moved his operation. Cora at the eatery knew someone who had been defrauded by the same scheme and had filed a case that was still active. Within 2 weeks, I had a sworn statement on file and my story added to an active complaint. I did not recover the 50,000 pesos. I was told, realistically, not to expect to. But the case moved. These things move slowly, but they move. Derek called when I made the mistake of mentioning it in passing on a video call. I was trying to be transparent, not dramatic, but there is no way to say, I nearly got defrauded to your son, without triggering a DEFCON-level parental rescue response. He wanted me home within the week. He said it 3 times. He escalated to Renata, who called separately to say she was deeply concerned about my capacity to make safe decisions alone. I listened to all of it. Then I said, Derek, I lost $880. I then activated a community network of 5 people who helped me file a complaint with a government agency within 2 weeks. I was not alone. I was never alone. That is the entire point. There was a pause. Also, I said, I have a mahjong partner who may actually be 81 years old and still slightly outside the law. I am fine. He didn't know whether to laugh or escalate further. Nang Sita, when I told her what happened, waved her hand in the way she waves when someone has played a bad tile and said, "Next time you want to invest, you ask me first. I know everybody here. Everybody. The ones who are honest and the ones who are not. I know them all the same." Then she took 6 tiles and I lost the round. She wasn't wrong about any of it. Renata came first, because Renata always moves faster on emotional decisions, and because she had booked the ticket. She arrived in October, 2 months after the fraud incident. She was prepared, I could tell, to find me diminished, isolated, perhaps slightly in denial about the arc of my decline. What she found was a woman who knew her neighbors by name, who bargained for produce in broken Ilongo with visible confidence, who had a standing appointment twice a week at a community center, and a 4-year-old downstairs who was demanding to meet the Lola from Renata's phone. Leah met Renata within 20 minutes of her arrival and proceeded to treat her as a visiting dignitary. On the second day, I took Renata to the Molo district, to the old church there, the Molo Church, built in 1831, one of the few churches in the Philippines that was historically run by women. We walked the plaza in the late afternoon, when the light goes amber and the air finally cools, and Renata was quiet in a way that meant she was absorbing something rather than preparing a response. She said, finally, "You seem like yourself. You seem like more than yourself." "I am." I thought. She stopped. Started again. I think I thought that if you were somewhere we couldn't see you, it meant something was wrong, that you were hiding or giving up or something. I didn't. She looked out at the church facade. I didn't think it could be that you were just living. On the last day of her visit, she said the thing I had been waiting for her to say, not because I needed her permission, but because I needed her to understand. I was wrong to see this as a problem that needed solving, Mom. You weren't broken. I was just scared. That is a specific thing to say. A real thing. Not, I was wrong, I'm sorry. Something more precise than that. And precision, for someone who raised her on budget reconciliations and compliance forms, matters. Derek came in February, 11 months after I arrived. He came alone, without his wife, and I understand now that was intentional, that he needed to see this outside the scaffolding of family consensus. He is not a man who changes his mind quickly or publicly. He needed to observe for several days before he would allow himself to form a conclusion. He observed. He watched Ferdinand fix a plumbing issue in my kitchen and saw me pay him the agreed rate without being taken advantage of, and say 3 sentences of thank you in Ilongo without consulting my phone. He watched me navigate the Molo market on a Saturday morning, the crowd, the pricing, the social geography of which vendor you greet and how. He came with me to my English tutoring session and sat in the back, and afterward my student Jun came up to him and said, in careful, proud English, "Your mother is the best teacher I have had. She explains things without making you feel stupid." On the 4th night, we sat on the porch with coffee and the frangipani smell and the Jaro River distant beneath the city sounds, and Derek said, "I think I assumed that needing help and needing care were the same thing, that if you needed anything, any support, any community, it meant you needed us. I didn't think about the possibility that you could build something new." "You're good at helping," I said. "You've always been good at that. I needed you to trust that I'm good at building." He nodded. He was quiet for a while. Then, "You are. I can see that." He extended his stay by 3 days. On the last evening, Rodrigo from upstairs came down, and the three of us ate at a small restaurant near the river, and Rodrigo talked about the pigeon, and Derek, who has not genuinely laughed about something frivolous since Patricia's funeral, laughed until he was wiping his eyes with his napkin. I stored that sound carefully. Let me be honest about the losses, because they are real, and I do not believe in pretending otherwise. I miss seasons. Real seasons, Indiana autumn, the specific orange of October light on the houses on Tillman Road. Iloilo has 2 seasons, wet and less wet. The wet one is impressive and total and occasionally terrifying. The less wet one is beautiful. But I miss the cold. I miss the specific satisfaction of the first warm day in March, which you can only fully appreciate if you've survived February. I miss casseroles. I know that sounds absurd, but there is a whole category of Midwestern comfort food that does not translate, that depends on a particular kind of indoor heat and a particular emotional weather that is specific to the northern interior of the United States. Tuna casserole. Chicken and noodles. The church potluck as a cultural form. I miss being 3 hours from my grandchildren. Brendan and Sophie are growing up in increments I witness through a screen. That costs me something real, consistently, and I miss being in the place where Patricia exists most fully, in the physical geography of shared memory. The restaurant we always went to on anniversaries. The park. The chair. What I have gained. I have gained a chest that opens when I breathe, most mornings. I have gained the experience of being known in the specific way that you can only be known when you are a little unusual, when you are the older American woman who comes to the market and plays mahjong and tutors English and argues, gently, with Rodrigo about the pigeon. I am a character. For the first time in 9 years, I am a character in a story that is still being written. I spend, all told, approximately $1,100 a month. Rent, food, health insurance, utilities, transportation, everything. That is $2,600 minus $1,100 equals $1,500 a month that I am contributing to a savings account that is growing instead of shrinking, which changes the way the future feels in ways I did not anticipate. I am healthy. My last checkup at St. Paul's, which cost me 400 pesos for the consult and 600 for blood work, showed a resting heart rate of 62 and blood pressure that my doctor in Indiana would have been satisfied with. The cardiologist, a small, cheerful man named Dr. Reyes, no relation to the fraudster, said, "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." I am doing walking, cooking real food, sleeping 8 hours, having reasons to be somewhere at a specific time, and being useful to people who are not my children. Last week, Leah knocked on my door holding a plastic horse and informed me that I was invited to her birthday party on Saturday, and that I should wear something pretty but not too pretty, because she was going to be the prettiest. I agreed to the terms without negotiation. I sit on this porch most evenings now, when the light drops and the city shifts into its nighttime register, the distant music, the motorcycles, the smell of garlic frying from 4 different directions, and I talk to myself sometimes, or not to myself. To the woman who was standing in the den in Muncie, holding a blue-striped dish towel, 9 years of grief in her hands, and no idea what the next chapter looked like. I say to her, "It's a Tuesday, but it isn't your last one. It isn't close to your last one. Go buy a plane ticket. Pack light. Bring the dish towel if you need to, and then let someone bring you coffee on the porch, and sit there and let the city smell like garlic and rain, and let yourself, finally, be in a story that is still happening." That is what I would tell her. That is what I did. If any part of this story sounds like your life, or the life you wish you were living, I would be grateful if you'd hit the like button and subscribe. I share these stories because the forums and the videos and a gap-toothed taxi driver named Rommel who asked if I was hungry changed my life. Maybe something here can do the same for someone else. Thank you for spending your time with me. I'll see you in the next one.